closer to Mount Cook, we're actually not going to be able to see the summit. That's because there's going to be a mountain in front of it. It's obviously a lot smaller, but as we get closer, it's actually going to block the summit. But you'll be able to see it again on the Hooker Valley Trail. And for the ones going to the village and the cafe and the hotel, you can actually see it from the windows there as well. So a little bit about Mount Cook. So in the late 1800s, that's when people tried to start to get to the summit. Mount Cook is one of the hardest mountains in the world to summit. It's not the biggest, but it's the most technical and hardest to summit. And reason being is the steep incline. Also, in being so close to the ocean, weather can change very fast and dramatically. So they started trying to summit in the 1800s. However, many people got close. Some even got as close as 15 meters to the top, but they had to turn around because the weather was getting too bad. And what they would do is they'd actually go up in stages, and they would dig snow dens and stay in the snow den and wait for their weather gap to keep going higher and higher. And then it wasn't until 1894 when 4 university students from New Zealand came here, and they attempted to summit, and they actually failed a couple times. And after they failed for the second time, they were down in the village, and they're at a pub, and they're talking to one of the bartenders about how they tried to summit, and they got so close, but the weather was getting bad, and they had to come down. And they're actually planning on leaving and heading back up north. The bartender mentioned that he heard that there's some Europeans coming in a week's time, and they were planning to summit Mount Cook. So those 4 university students decided if someone was going to summit the mountain, the first people to do it should be from New Zealand, not from Europe. So they finished up at the pub, and they actually started going back up Mount Cook. This time they were successful, and they did summit the mountain, and they actually summited on Christmas Day, Christmas morning on 1894. And then a week later, those Europeans did show up, and they did summit it as well, but it was 4 New Zealanders that were the first ones. And probably one of the most famous people from New Zealand, Sir Edmund Hillary, one of the first people to summit Everest. He did spend a lot of time in this area practicing on these mountains for Everest, and he actually did summit Mount Cook 3 times as well. But he also did say that out of all the mountains he did summit, Mount Cook was one of the hardest. And even when he did summit Everest with Tezi, another guy from Nepal, to the day they both died, none of them did say who made it first. They always said they did it at the exact same time. They did try to get it out of them. Nepal wanted it to be someone from their country that made it to the top first, and the royal family from England wanted it to be an English person from the Commonwealth. And Tezi actually did get tricked into signing a piece of paper stating that he was the first one. And this was a time just after they both summited the mountain, and they were touring around the world, getting a lot of attention and signing autographs. And Tezi thought he was signing an autograph, where he was actually signing a piece of paper stating that he was the first one, and Sir Edmund Hillary was the second one. And this actually made Tezi really upset. And then he actually had that revoked. So until the days, they both have passed away now, but they never did say who was the first one to the top. They always said they did it together because they had such a strong friendship. So as we're coming up to Mount Cook here, if you look at the summit, and then on the right hand side, it goes down a bit. It kind of looks like a hook shape. So right at the top of that hook shape is where the last hut is before you have to rush to the summit if you want to summit it. And that's called the Empress Hut. These huts are nothing fancy. It's just some shelters, some bunk beds, and probably just some cooking utensils and a little gas. And sometimes you have to wait in there for days and days for your weather gap to go for the summit. And they said some people will usually leave if they get their weather gap at 10 p.m. and they'll usually reach the summit the following day at 8 a.m. and they'll spend a couple hours up there, and then they'll start to descend back down to the Empress Hut. About 7 meters of snow at the top of Mount Cook. The sheep heading up the mountains now. It's getting too warm for them down here, so they'll start making their way up. That has a bit of the rock flour in it. You can see how it's kind of a little bit milky. One of the 3 airports here as well, on the right. You'll see a lot of helicopters flying around today. New Zealand actually has invented quite a bit of things. And one thing they actually invented here in Mount Cook was skis for airplanes. So they put a lot of skids on the airplanes here, and that was so they could land on the glaciers. You can't land with the wheels or pontoons. So they actually made skis. And this was the first place that they did it. So you might even catch a plane flying around with a pair of skis on the bottom today. They also invented the jet boat in Queenstown. So if you're going on the Shotover jet boat or the K jet boat, the first one was actually in the Shotover River. And they only need about 6 inches of water to float. it is living up to its name now. It is the Cloud Piercer. Is where a lot of people will stop and try and get that famous Instagram photo by standing in the middle of the road and almost getting hit by vehicles.